Well, hello, everybody. It's the Reanimated Podcast. Welcome. This is a unique intro because we are, for the first time, maybe, in 3 different time zones. I'm going to go chronologically and welcome a co-host, H.A. Conrad from the East Coast in New York. How are you?
Hello. I'm
Welcome.
good.
Great. I am Stuart. I'm your other co-host, and I am in California. And for the first time, we have gone tri-coastal. I'm not sure if Hawaii counts as a coast, but Kyle Diaz is coming at us from the Big Island or the White Lotus. Where are you?
I'm on Kauai, so if you hear some roosters going off in the background during my recording, I'm sorry because they're all over the place down here. But I think Kauai is like the ultimate coast. There's coast in literally every direction.
Oh, you're so sorry. You're broadcasting from Hawaii. Nice. Oh, those are just roosters going off in the background. Never mind me over here.
Never mind.
In
Also,
tropical paradise.
Is this how you describe roosters crowing as going off? They're like car alarms?
Sounds like they're going off, it's unexpected.
Fair enough. Well, welcome. I'm glad that we could get this podcast together, and Kyle, really special guest status elevated today with calling in from Hawaii. Well done.
I couldn't miss the chance to talk about the episode we're going to talk about today.
It's true. It was a doozy. A lot of people have been flipping out about it since last Sunday. And so before we can get to that, though, we have a little bit of news. And the first one is quite somber, which was that like a day after last episode aired, Annie Wershing, the actor who played Tess, did the voice acting and motion capture for Tess in the game, passed away from cancer, age 45, tragic, lost too early. She has a long list of other projects that she's worked on, including 24. And a lot of people were sharing their feelings about it on Twitter last week. And I'd mentioned her name because folks on Reddit had been wondering why she wasn't up for playing Tess instead of Anna Torv.
When they talked to Druckmann and some other people about it, they were pretty sort of general, which I think they were probably trying to protect her privacy. But my guess is that they probably did want her to get involved, and she just wasn't able to. So really, really sad. And she was like Picard, like she was incredible in that as well. So it's really just a huge loss, but I'm glad that they at least dedicated, I think was it this episode or the last episode to her?
I'm not sure when they put up that dedicated to Annie Wershing and photo on this episode, but I feel like she died the day after it aired.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I don't think I saw that when I watched it.
Yeah. So anyway, very sad about that. And I will say, I think that, Anna Torv honored the character. So that was at least good, but it was definitely and speaking of heart-wrenching episodes, this one was very heart-wrenching, at least for me. So we'll get into that, but before we do that, a couple of lighter notes. I don't think this is shocking, Stuart, but the AV Club has a list of the next 24 rom-com stars, and there's quite a few Walking Dead alum in there. I don't, it's kind of funny because I think there's some obvious choices, but it's just sort of like, okay, what do you do after Walking Dead? You become a rom-com star. I think they're just hopeful. I think they're just hopeful, but I definitely like some of their choices in here.
Yeah, it's not a short list. There's 24 people on this list, and only I'd say 2 of them are for sure Walking Dead alumni, but there's a lot of very recognizable faces and names on this list too, including Ariana Grande. I guess she's acted now, hasn't she? Yeah. But the 2 from Walking Dead were Tyler James William, who is probably best known now for Abbott Elementary. He's won an Emmy, I assume. But he was Noah on The Walking Dead. And Stephen Yeun, our favorite, our long lost Stephen Yeun. I wonder what he's up to. I feel like I haven't seen him in a minute. So
I haven't seen him in a while, and I would like to see him again. I really love him, so I hope he makes hope he has it's one of those things where he has 10 different projects and they all come out at once.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of funny because he's actually been in quite a few things that I've seen recently. I think he's been kind of still putting in the work. He was excellent in Nope. Yeah, it was a small part, but a very memorable one.
Oh, that's right. He has a cowboy hat. I haven't seen
He does have a cowboy hat. And it's awesome.
He's also one of the voices in Invincible.
Yes.
So that's, maybe not live action, but that's certainly getting a lot of play. So,
And then
Uh,
he was excellent in a film that came out in I think 2019 called Minari,
right.
yeah,
which
Which
was
they got
oh
nominated,
sorry,
didn't
go
they?
ahead. I can't
yes,
remember
yes, it
if he
did.
was nominated, but I think the movie itself got a lot of acclaim and maybe a Oscar nomination. So it was a really good coming
Right.
of age
And
story.
also he was I think he was one of the executive producers for that one too. I'm almost positive.
Well,
So
I mean,
He's been putting in the work.
I don't
yeah,
know that rom-com is necessarily where his career needs to take him, but it would put him in front of more eyeballs than like art house stuff or horror, I guess. So, and Stephen Yeun needs to be in front of more eyeballs. That's my
great.
take.
Agreed. But let's be hopeful on that. And last but not least, there is an upcoming scripted zombie podcast coming up that Bloody Disgusting is partnering with the George Romero Foundation to do. So
That's right. And it's going to be called The Dead. And so it'll join We're Alive in the scripted zombie podcast world. I'm sure that there are others, but there are definitely others. Every so often when I do a zombie podcast search, I see other ones that are like, this is the world that we're describing. So that'll be interesting to listen to. Give it a shot. I don't know when it's actually coming out, but we'll keep an eye out for it. It's going to be 24 episodes.
I feel like media companies really want scripted audio or fiction audio to be a thing, because I can see why, because it's cheap, but it kind of should have the same crossover appeal that the television shows of the same nature do. But in my opinion, it's really just not. Like there's very, very few scripted podcasts that have become popular. I mean, Welcome to Night Vale is the only one I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's been a couple, but I think that I don't know. I just don't know that it's gonna. I think they keep wanting it to take off, and it just doesn't have the legs to do that, or the interest. And so, I don't know. We'll see what happens with this one. Maybe it'll be really good. We don't know.
I mean, you say that. I know that we listened to a little bit of We're Alive and then kind of weren't captivated that much, but they're still producing. We're Alive has been getting made for I don't know, like a decade, it feels like, and I think they're even branching out.
The thing I'm thinking of is, in terms of not quite the same thing, but like there's like a lot of Doctor Who audio plays and things like that, and that's been going on for years and years, and that has like a huge following, but it's not quite the same thing. But that's, I'm guessing that they're trying to sort of tie into that, and they sort of like tie that some of those stories and things into the actual show sometimes, though not quite. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with this one. But I also want to point out that the things that we didn't include in this, but because I am just too terrified of it, there were, totally understandable, and I don't think anybody's shocked by this, but there's like a lot of articles coming out about fungi, cordyceps, whether it could happen. And one of the things that Stuart and I were talking about is that prior to the pandemic there were some articles about in this vein that kind of like quieted down. There's a lot of that stuff out there, but quite frankly it terrifies me too much, so I don't think we should go into it in any great detail.
Can I tell you my favorite thing? This is completely unfact checked and came from some random person on TikTok that I don't follow and have no
Okay.
idea who they are. So take it with a huge grain of salt. But according to this person who claimed to be an expert, cordyceps actually does not infect the brain. It infects like all the muscle and tissue and stuff, but leaves the brain alone.
Oh God.
So in her opinion, the zombies in The Last of Us should still be kind of sentient inside of their horrible mutated bodies. I don't think that can possibly be true because you kill them by destroying the brain. So so if the fungi was like animating, the arms and stuff, I don't think that would work very well, but it's a really horrible thought to contemplate.
Can you imagine, like they're running at you screaming like, no, don't make me do this or something.
Yeah,
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not going to be talking about valley fever. We're not going to be talking about what was it, the hospital fungus and all.
Candida auris.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So
So anyway,
scary. So scary.
so scary. So it's not that we don't know it's out there, it's just that I can't bear to think about it really.
Thank
So,
you. No, thank you.
so with that, I think we should get into this episode, which I'm really excited to talk with both of you about. I watched it a couple of times.
Me too. Yeah.
And then
This one's called Long Long Time.
yep.
It's directed by Peter Hoare, Hoar, and written by Craig Mazin. And the two main stars, I think everybody knows about the Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett at this point. Although Billy Joel and Ellie both get an intro and an outro in this episode too. And Anna Torv comes back. Woohoo!
Yeah. Oh, if it was Billy Joel, that would have been a totally different twist on this entire story.
What a weird show it would have been.
But yes. So let's hop in. And I do think with the intro, this is something that Stuart was teasing me about, because I did indeed write in my notes, because it basically opens up that it's like 10 miles west of Boston. And my immediate reaction was, where is this 10 miles west of Boston? There's no such thing that looks like this 10 miles west. Yeah. Which is true.
You and everybody on Twitter and Boston.com, like Boston's preeminent magazine, were like, no, right. So there's no like coniferous forests either.
No,
I feel like
in the mountain, it was the mountain piece too that was sort of like, I don't know about that. But that said, I just, I let that go. Apparently some other people really made them.
There was some funny stuff from that Boston.com article where they were pulling out tweets from folks who had taken a screen grab from Fellowship of the Ring and when they're walking through the mountains. With the subtitle Framingham, Massachusetts, which is actually about 10 miles west of Boston, which was funny. And then somebody else was like, well, it wouldn't have looked, the only reason it didn't look like Boston because there wasn't a Dunkies there. And so they photoshopped in a Dunkin' Donuts.
Nice. But that said, all that aside, we get Joel and Ellie kind of now on their own and dealing with a few things. Joel is, making one of those, what would you call those things? Stone cairn things, yeah. Which, by the way, I've never actually seen anybody do. So you just see them and you're like, oh, I wonder who made that. So I was like, all right. So he's doing his own weird Joel morning thing here. And then Ellie just totally addresses this with him. And so I do feel like this is a theme that we see both in the intro and the outro, where she's basically trying to engage with him and say, it's not my fault that Tess died. And he's like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to hear or read the word Tess ever again. I feel like this is pretty consistent with his character. Yeah. Like he has as a self-defense mechanism just shut down any sort of emotional response to loved ones.
Right. Feels like, but the other thing I think that this does, that sets them up going to the Cumberland Farms, which as a New Englander, I found really funny. But
so what's the joke?
It's like Cumberland Farms is always, kind of there and existing, and don't know why it still exists as a company.
But what is Cumberland Farms?
What is it?
Yeah, it's like I guess the equivalent. It's like a Wawa, I guess, or like a what? Like just like a gas station convenience store chain that's up in New England.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes some sense.
It's so weird what production designers and filmmakers choose to care about. Like, they obviously were familiar enough with Boston to work in Cumberland Farms, which is not even a very well-known establishment, because I have heard of Wawa, I've not heard of Cumberland Farms. But then they're just like, oh, well, let's just plop this right in the middle of like the Alberta.
It's especially well known in New England and Massachusetts, I think. I know like that's just always been like the thing that you would see growing up. So, it is a thing, but it's a very, very regional thing. You're totally right, though, Kyle. It's kind of an odd thing.
Well, but so they must have known that the setting was completely incongruous for it then. Like somebody on set, or Craig Mazin or somebody knew enough to put Cumberland Farms in there, but then,
right.
Somehow didn't know enough to say, hey, this looks nothing like Western
Well, I
Massachusetts
mean,
or
look, I think we have to give them a little bit of grace because possibly they were going to do something a little different, but because of COVID and everything, they had to do all the shooting up in Canada.
But they
So
couldn't
yeah, that's
even
probably true.
like well, they had to, or they couldn't like find. I don't know. Like it
I,
would. I felt like it wouldn't have been so difficult to send
to do a shot
Pedro
somewhere, right?
Pascal and a B team to yeah to anywhere. It doesn't even have to. It could be Ohio. It could be Michigan.
It could be Montreal. Like you could go just over to the parts of Canada that are close to this.
Yeah, with a deciduous forest and a burbling brook with a lot of foliage and maybe some leaves turning because it looks like fall. It feels like cold weather. I don't know, like yeah, it does feel a little bit like they're sticking a finger in the eye of the Northeast by saying 10 miles west of Boston. And at the end of the day, this episode blows everything about that nitpick out of the water. It's just that was like the intro, right? So it's tough for some folks to be like, wait, huh? And Stephen King got a lot of guff for saying that on Twitter because they were like, "That's your takeaway." And he's like, "Look, I'm a famous New England author. I'm sorry, this is like, I have to do this."
Right.
But
It didn't shock me that he did it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." So, you know,
yeah,
it's a thing you do. New Englanders are very cantankerous people.
there's some dialogue that happens in the woods right after he makes his cairn and is washing off his broken, bloodied fist.
Mm.
Um, where she not only does she try to talk about Tess, but she also says, "Oh, I've never been in the woods before. More bugs than I would have thought." And it's video game watch, so I'm going to point out that that's a line from the video game. After they get out of Boston, they're in this much more idyllic looking, sunny, butterfly strewn sort of scene right before they get into Bill's town, and she says that same line, which it doesn't really vibe as well in this scene because it's like kind of dark and cold looking. Inside Cumberland Farms, Joel is looking for this box. Ellie is kind of funnily making fun of him for not knowing where it is anymore, and he's like, "I'm zeroing in on it," which I thought
Yep.
was funny.
And she's
Um,
like, I mean, this is nice though because you get like a bit. We've gotten this before, but they start. She's poking fun at him, but he doesn't take it too seriously. So I think that they're building up that rapport between them, and that continues in the outro as well.
her
Um,
annoying him is a real element of their relationship,
right.
especially in the game too. In this gas station, she also sees Mortal Kombat, a video game, and runs
Mhm.
up to it and says, "Oh, this I love," or something like, "I have a friend who knows everything about this game," and then describes one of the characters from the game and a final move that they have. This is also straight out of the game. It's while they're exploring well, while I was exploring Bill's town, there is a restaurant or something with a console that she runs up to and says something. I think the game in that was more generic than Mortal Kombat, but the line is very similar. So those were, as far as I know, the only two things out of the game in this
Yeah,
episode.
we're about to completely depart from the game, so they wanted to work a last couple of these
Right.
in here.
Yeah,
Right. And I'll also say though that their decisions when they do depart from the game and especially in this case I think was very successful and the right decision to make. I think it makes it a very different series and a better series. So,
Oh yeah,
there was a lot of room to improve on Bill's storyline, even though it's similar. There are elements of similarity. Rather, I shouldn't say it's similar. Bill is a character, and Frank is a character in the game, but the way that everything goes is completely different. So, but also in a couple in Farms, we get a scene of Ellie kind of stretching her muscles a little bit, doing an activity and kind of carling up a little, going after that walker stuck in the mud outside the farm in season 2, except it's a clicker stuck in some rubble. What did you guys
well,
think of the
and
scene? What was this trying to tell you
okay,
about her
so
character?
so I feel like this is playing upon a little bit of what we already knew about her, or at least some of what she shared with Tess, which is how she got bitten in the first place, which she takes risks, she goes off and does things on her own. She has no problem doing that. And at least in this case, there it shows definitely a little bit of a kind of a sadistic side to her, I think. But also just sort of like, you know, if there was any question about whether she was whether I think there's always been this thing like, oh, are you on the side of the fungus or not, and there's this curiosity and fear about her, because she had been bitten and isn't taken over and things like that. But I feel like this shows you a little bit of what she's like when nobody else is looking. So I thought that was helpful in sort of informing that. What did you think, Kyle?
I think she's a little fascinated by the infected too. Like she has this, I don't know. It's something that she could have been, if she wasn't just this genetic, you know, mutation or something hadn't happened to her that makes her able to fight it off. So she has this kind of deep-seated interest in them, and she, I think, really enjoyed the chance to get close to one and kind of see it up close, and then, you know, slowly poke something into its brain and put it out of its misery. That's what I took away from it. The look on her face is just like complete fascination.
Yeah,
Fascination, but also a little bit of disgust too. So it's not. I don't think she wants to be this, or at least that's not what it feels like to me. But maybe I'm.
No, I don't think so either.
No, the look on her face when she stabs it in the head is more like anger, but I think it's also just like I have power over this, and I don't, because when she first hears it, it's a great reaction shot of Bella Ramsey like inadvertently backing into the shelf that she's standing in front of. I thought that was a great little flinch. The flinching in this show so far has been, on point.
Mm-hmm.
So she pulls herself back up. Joel is none the wiser that she's done this risky thing, and she emerges with some feminine care products, which I'm sure are probably really hard to come by in the apocalypse. So good find. Not sure it was worth the risk, but and then the fishing tackle box that Joel is pulling out of that hole in the floor, it looks like boxes you would find in the game that would have like gear and stuff in them. I don't know, Kyle, if that triggered anything in your head.
I mean, this whole scene is very reminiscent of kind of the moments between the battles when you go around whatever area you're in and kind of scrounge around for stuff. I mean, in the game, Joel's making like these health packs, and he's making Molotov cocktails, and he's strapping pocket knives onto things to make shivs and stuff like that. So there's this crafting element that isn't here, thankfully, because I don't think it would work very well. But definitely, there's a loot system where you're kind of constantly low on all of your supplies, and so anytime you end up in a place like this, you just start like going through all the drawers and stuff like that and seeing what you could find.
I will say the crafting in the game is one of the more cinematic versions of crafting I've ever seen, where if you are upgrading your revolver to make it shoot faster, you like you take your revolver, you put it on a desk, you like do things to it, like you take out a tool and you use a screwdriver on it, or you file off something on your shotgun to make it shoot faster, or you actually add parts to it to increase the capacity of the chamber, of the like how many rounds you can have in it. It's, to me, it was like it's usually I'm trying to get through crafting as fast as possible, but in The Last of Us, I would say it's actually kind of fun to watch. However, like you said, it's not really cinematic enough or enjoyable enough for TV necessarily,
or realistic enough.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, he can't have 7 Molotov cocktails just in his pants.
Yeah, and they just light on fire immediately as soon as he puts them in his hand. That would be a different kind of superpower. But they leave Cumberland Farms behind and continue walking. You have the airplane shot. I don't remember if these are actually in the right order, but the shot of the airplane on the hillside, which was another kind of interesting scene. This girl's 14. The last airplane crashed 6 years ago. 6 years before that, we imagine. Although there were helicopters in Boston, so it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't be that insane to her that people were in the sky when that's actually still a thing in her timeline.
Yeah, but not like as like not something that's accessible to most people.
Yeah, commercial air travel is not something that she can just book a flight on. So I get why she'd be fascinated.
Yeah, so similar to the video game, it's something she's probably heard a lot about. And then she also is asking him how it all happened. And I thought that this was sort of this is a good lead in and gives you a little bit more of the what they're basing the mythology of this series on, and the idea that she basically says, how did everything just stop? Everything people are flying around, people are doing all this one day, and then the next day everything is crap. And he gives the whole flower hypothesis with the cordyceps in there and mutations and things like that. And he even specifically mentions pancake mix, which is something.
He's got a thoughtful look on his face when he says that, right?
Yep.
Like he's like pancake.
He does.
Just basically saying it got into the food supply, and took a day to sort of hit, but then everybody had it, and that's where we were. And
I feel
then
like it was a dig on monoculture too, because
yep,
he's talking about like it's the same damn things on every shelf around the
yep.
world. So he's definitely or the writers are taking a shot at the ways that we can actually screw ourselves over with monoculture.
And then the other part that's very dark in this, because he's, look, he's very gruff. He's very, like he likes to act as if he doesn't care that much, but he clearly does. But he does try to shield Ellie from certain things, and does in this case. And she's like, I don't need to be shielded from this, and come across basically what is essentially a graveyard. And the sort of the truth comes out that people were told that they were going to go into these basically safety camps, but there wasn't enough room for everybody, so they killed people. And Ellie is horrified but also curious, because the idea of this, especially given like in her world at this point, there are very few uninfected people, right? Like there are little sort of islands and things like that. And he's like, but yeah, well, these are less people that were going to be infected and running around in threats, basically.
Yeah. Dead people can't spread infection. That is a line that comes up later in the game too.
Yeah.
But just not in this. I'm noticing that more too as I'm playing the game more. They've taken stuff that happens later and inserted it in earlier, which is, cool if it makes more sense to do it that way. Like the hotel dialogue when they were in the flooded hotel lobby is actually like probably in episode 4, or that's where it would have shown up if we've been doing things completely chronologically. And the dead people can't spread infection is another one of those sort of lines that gets.
And I have to say, just the direction of this episode and the storytelling of this episode, and where they take this and they segue from, the pattern of the woman's dress and the kid's blanket, and segue that into the flashback to then get into Frank and Bill's story. I thought that was very well done.
That was, yeah, like bizarre. Like you're looking at the skeletons of this woman and her baby, and then you're looking at them. Like that was pretty affecting.
Right.
Can I tell you, it actually like gave me a moment of like anger, because not knowing where this show was going, when they flashed back to that woman and her baby, I was like, God damn it, are they gonna make me watch this baby die? Like, I get it. Like, I understand what happened. I don't have to follow these people and watch them get shot by some militia on the side of the road. Like, and I got like a moment of like anger that basically they were gonna take this like kind of lazy way out, but then they completely subverted my expectation and then just panned away from them and left it, in yeah, in your imagination, the actual road of how they got to that place.
Yeah.
So they sidestepped it very closely. I think you know a weaker show, or a show that wasn't quite so clever about this, would have been like, oh, let's just like tell this story really quick before we get into Bill's thing, and it's like we don't need it. We know how it ends already.
Right.
So I really thought they were gonna make us watch that woman and her baby die.
Which is exactly why I mentioned it, because Kyle, you and I had the same exact reaction, because I said, really, you're gonna do this? Because this is just not, I don't need to see this. And
Yeah.
and they didn't do that. And I was like, wow, well done, team. And I was really impressed with how they just used it as a way to enter into the story of Bill.
Yes.
I think they did this a few times in this episode. I think it's not like and I had also the same response. I was not wanting to see how that went. And it is a relief when you end up in Bill's basement and get introduced to him in profile and silhouette. And he gets to deliver his first line, which according to Craig was actually written as like a thought bubble in the
the
script.
And Offerman was like, I'm gonna say this.
By the way, I need to say this out loud. Yeah.
And so you know what? He was right, because it was an amazing line. So
yeah, it's a good line. And that's the kind of thing that Craig is writing in the script, is like, here's your motivation actor. Like that's a very good, that's a nice little piece of text to put into their heads or out of their mouths as Nick Offerman took over. So I don't know how anybody was going to find that secret bunker under his basement, because when he comes out of there, it's a cool little cabinet staircase deal. Mm-hmm. I liked it. We then sort of get into the section of the episode where we get to meet Bill, who is clearly just a prepper, although he likes to call himself a survivalist.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a couple of musical montages here.
Right. And this is his version of the 28 Days Later grocery store scene. The happy,
yeah.
like
Except that
all
it's what differs from that is that that's like 28 days later, at least, like maybe 30 days into the apocalypse. And this guy is doing this as fast as he can, like even to the point where the power goes out when he's in Home Depot, and he's like, okay, yeah, that was fast.
Yep.
And he's going to the natural gas plant. I love the fact that he was like on a mission to get, he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew he had to do it, and he did it to Fleetwood Mac.
Yep. And I have, again, the soundtrack to this show is awesome. So
This one, yeah,
awesome.
they spent, I mean, the
A
Linda
lot of
Ronstadt probably did not cost a lot of money, considering it was kind of like an unknown, not an unknown song, but lesser known than the Depeche Mode or the other stuff that they've been playing. But Cream, The White Room, and I forget what the Fleetwood Mac song was called. But
I'm Coming Home to Stay.
yeah, just you got to imagine that they spent a fair amount on this one.
Right. So, but I like, you get to know so much about Bill in this little montage scene, and some of it is very joyful, some of it is like both joyful but also showing the level of his paranoia and also loneliness. So he's doing all of this stuff, and you definitely have to ask yourself why to some extent, but he's really just taking this world. There is no, at least from what he is showing us in this montage, there's no sadness. Like, he seems pretty happy that the circumstances are what they are. He's got this whole town to himself, he's got all these resources.
I'd say he's getting joy out of like cooking himself nice meals and drinking good wine and watching zombies get blown up by his traps. Like, those are his joy sources. And he doesn't feel, I would say he doesn't feel lonely really until he meets Frank.
Right. Or maybe he does and he doesn't know it. So maybe
I guess that's what I mean.
Thing. So in any case, just sort of the lead in to him meeting Frank, I think, is really excellent and just sets the table for who he is before Frank enters. And Frank is played by Murray Bartlett, who is also an excellent actor, though I have to say I don't know that I had seen him in anything else, because I have not watched not seen White Lotus yet, which I think he is a main cast member in that, right?
That's what introduced him to me. So I don't think he's been in too much else, but that we would have seen stateside. But he is amazing in White Lotus,
and he's now a household name. Like with 2 shows, he has, and he's like, I don't know, 50 or something. Now he's in, like, him and Offerman were both on late night talk shows this past week.
But I really loved how the story totally played out, and it plays out in a way that makes total sense to me. Bill is incredibly paranoid, but possibly a little lonely, so he keeps sort of like allowing Frank to have certain things. And there's a bit of like, I think that he enjoys showing Frank all the things that he has, like these luxuries that he has and things like that. So I thought one of like a cool little moment was when Frank is taking a shower, and Bill is just like, okay, I'm leaving you clothes, and Frank is like, oh gosh, can I just have 5 more minutes? So there's a little bit of like, I think that Bill enjoys the fact that somebody is appreciating all this stuff that he's put together too. Obviously, of course, after he's tested him for the fungus and cordyceps and all that. But his general reaction is, okay, it's a little bit Dread Pirate Roberts. It's like, all right, you can come and do this, but then you have to leave, and you can do this, and then you have to leave. And that's sort of his theme. Maybe I'll kill you in the morning kind of a thing. But keeps allowing him to stay, and kind of, and he's like not even just allowing him to stay, he's making him like gourmet meal and all that kind of thing. So
just to make a little bit of a broader point before we kind of launch into their romance, because the romance is what really is the core of this episode, and it's also kind of a huge deviation. We talked a lot in the first 2 episodes of the series about how close it is to the game, and this is just a complete deviation in every single way.
Yep.
The Last of Us is making this video game adaptation to television look so easy that I think it's like important to remember that it's actually really hard and it fails much more frequently than it succeeds.
Yep.
Especially for you know, I don't know if I can fanatics, geeks, nerds, whatever your nomenclature is, like there have been a lot of disappointments, especially in the last 10 or so years, as all these companies have had to find, streaming shows and been on this furious search for properties to adapt. Um, so I at some point I was thinking about this and I just kind of sat there and listed out all of the disappointing adaptations I could remember from the last couple of years. And I came up with a list of 30. Now, I'm
Wow.
not going to read
Okay.
them all, but like there's a lot of these out there that, that if you're a big fan of The Witcher or Percy Jackson or Halo, or there's, you can just go on and on and on about all of these things that have been adapted super poorly.
Whoa,
And
The
so one thing
Witcher though?
I don't know that The Witcher should be on that list.
Maybe maybe
if you
Blood
visit
Oranges, but
if you visit the subreddit for The Witcher, you will find a fandom completely betrayed by those theories. And I'm kind of on both sides. I enjoyed the show fine. I think a lot of people enjoy the show, but for people who like The Witcher, especially the novels, but also the video games, they loathe the Netflix show. So I think that one thing that the Last of Us folks did really well here is they got even before they got better, if that makes sense. They spent the first two episodes basically saying, "Hey, calm down. We get it. We know why you liked this. We're going to do some stuff literally just exactly the same. We're going to make you feel very comfortable. You're in good hands. We've got the guy here who did the game. We've got this." And then in episode 3, after everyone's kind of settled down a little bit and understood, okay, like there's at least going to be some stuff here that's pretty good. That's when they're like, okay, here we're going to do a whole episode that only has like two zombies in it and is mostly just a gay romance. Like, I think it was a very well designed little bait and switch when they decided to deviate from the game. Because if they came out of the gate and just started changing things left, right, and center, right off the bat, I think there would have been a lot of kind of unsettled feeling from people who were really truly fans of the game heading into this
when
episode.
you say
So
fan, I'm hearing toxic fan though,
Yeah,
based
me
on
too.
the Reddit thing. Like AJ and I last year in the last 12 months reviewed the Resident Evil show that was on Netflix, which for all intents and purposes was a decent show, but got consistent 1-star reviews from its quote unquote fans because they race changed some characters and they set some stuff in the future. And they mixed it all around. This is a franchise that has been done and done and done, right? Like you've seen every episode or every movie of this video game that's been adapted, and they're not all great. And this show was not a faithful adaptation, but it was something more. Like it left room for evolution. I don't disagree that they've done this in a way that will like defang some of that toxicity, but part of me doesn't want to cater to it because it's bullshit. Like,
And I also need to throw in here, there actually has been a lot of negative reaction, which is a very homophobic reaction to this particular episode, which, people have called it out and said what it is. And that toxicity, I think, we have seen for other shows based upon race, sexuality, other things where people just go and they try to give it 1 or no star reviews because they're trying to kind of like scheme the sort of Rotten Tomatoes ratings and things like that. And for shows that are actually really amazingly well done and absolutely don't deserve it. So, I definitely agree. I don't think it should be catered to. And I also think that there has to be some leeway and understanding that, yeah, it's an adaptation. So you're going to have to make certain changes and you're going to have to and the creators want to do some things to make it a little bit more like a more complex and richer story. So I don't know.
I just kind of want to jump in here because I definitely agree that there is kind of a trollish, group of people out there who are still review bombing this show and all that kind of stuff. But that's not exactly what I was talking about. I wasn't saying that, if they hadn't made fans of the show feel so comfortable for the first two episodes that they would have reacted in a homophobic or a negative way because of the subject matter. I was more saying that um, they they got the fans of the source material on board before making the big
Big swings.
deviations,
I
which I
hear
think
you.
is a smart strategy. And so I think that actually, by and large, the fandom for this video game, which you might expect to be an extremely toxic group of people, has actually been very much enthused by this episode and by the changes that they've made to Bill and Frank's storyline.
I also
That's a good point, Kyle. And I will also say that this game was already LGBTQ friendly, right? Like there are
Yes.
well-known gay. I mean, Bill and Frank, it's hinted at. It's not like explicit. Were part like Bill refers to Frank as his partner a lot and someone he looked out for, someone he cared about. I think even this is like as far as it goes. There's certainly no like I love you, let's get married. Um, but
Right. And I also wasn't trying to suggest that the fan base is, because I do know that this game is LGBTQ friendly. I just think, there is this tendency, unfortunately, where sometimes people are doing the review bombing and sort of pretending to be fans. Do you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
so anyway, sorry I didn't mean to imply, Kyle. that-
No. My main point is just that it's actually the quality of the source material has zero effect on the quality of the adaptation, and so it is very, very easy to picture this going horribly wrong and being a big disappointment. And so far, not only is it not a big disappointment, it's actually kind of gaining, um, you know, kind of fans and kind of a popular culture momentum as it rolls along.
Yep.
And I think that's really, it's pretty remarkable considering how many of these we've just seen fall on their face.
I also
yeah,
think the appeal, I mean, I think part of it and the way that this episode was done specifically is that I think this as a standalone episode, you could watch this episode without it's almost like a mini movie. And when I actually wanted my husband to watch it, which he has not yet because it's heartbreaking and whatever, and he was like, well, what, why is it so heartbreaking, and what, and can I watch it without watching the rest of this thing? And I'm like, no, you probably can. I mean, some of the context will be a little lost on you, at least from the get, for the intro and the outro, but you could watch this as almost like a standalone thing. And it reminds it, like what I described it as was sort of the initial montage to Up, where you learn all these things and you see this whole little like big story, but in this very small amount of time. um and I think that when you do something like this, it has, appeal to the masses as well as to the people that are fans of the game, because it gives them something a little bit more rich and newer, so it can be enjoyed by everybody. But this is, I mean, it would not shock me if um um if these two actors end up being put up for some awards and things like that. I personally think it's that good. I know it's gotten a couple of negative things that people said it was very like kind of like trite and whatever. I don't know. The reviewer of Vulture was pretty negative, which I was like, I don't know if you were watching the same thing I was watching.
there's
But
got to be somebody.
yeah, always somebody. But anyway, I just think that this is definitely what you want to see for this kind of a show, and it takes it in an entirely different and cooler direction, but still being dedicated to like the overall story, I guess.
So Rotten Tomatoes, it was like, I don't know, 99, 99, I think, episode one. Now it's 97, 92. Audience score is 92 out of 7,100 plus reviews. So I'd say, yeah, like it has a mainstream appeal that is going to drown out the trolls at this point, which is great. And
Well, and this episode landed like a like a bomb as far as like, oh yeah, like it exploded in terms of popularity from what I can tell in online circles.
Mhm.
Like Last of Us went from a show that like people were watching to like a show that it felt like everybody was talking about in that kind of water coolery way.
But what
Yeah,
else is it up against? Like, there's not a lot of other content out there.
Well, that's true. In January.
anyway,
Yeah.
well, so okay, so you two know a lot more about the game than I do, and I knew a minimal amount about these two characters, and I really thought what we were going into, like I did not expect this at all. just what happened. And I did not expect this episode to go the way it did. I thought it was definitely going to be more of a Joel and Ellie getting help from Bill kind of a thing. And then when the story kept unfolding with Bill and Frank, I was just shocked, and I kept being like, oh wow, they're really taking this in a very different place than I thought it would. And it was a pleasant surprise. So I just was it hit me very hard, so hard that I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna have to actually watch this again, because I was a little bit like, it was a really, to me, it was a very moving and wonderful episode. So, I don't, did you two have expectations knowing what you knew about the characters? Did you expect this, or had you been spoiled by it before you saw it?
Luckily, when things went the way they went, I was not surprised, but I was thrown a twist, and this is a little bit later in the episode. But after the night with the Raiders, I kind of thought we were going into a dream sequence for the last third of their story. And so, and I kind of feel like the writers were trying to do that, because when Joel and Ellie walk into the house, there's that portrait of Bill with the smears of paint, and I was like, okay, no, it was not a dream sequence. Like, that was my anchor point. But I kind of thought that everything from when Bill was on the dining room table bleeding until that scene, it could have been, to me, it seemed feasible that was all a dream sequence. And that was not like an expectation from the game that I brought in. It was just like kind of following what I thought was the breadcrumbs that I've been given, in a way. I don't know if you guys had that reaction or not.
I didn't know. I didn't that didn't occur to me. In terms of the games, I think Bill in the games is kind of a charming but one note character. He's kind of just like Bill is at the beginning of this episode the whole way through. And so the entire evolution that he goes through, yeah, his relationship with Frank is hinted at here and there, but I think it's really interesting that this episode is going to caught fire in this way and has impacted people so strongly, because the ground that it's going over, this kind of like love in the apocalypse, or like human connection when everything has gone down the tubes, it has actually been fairly well explored recently by other shows. So HA, I don't know if you've seen these two, but anybody who's listening, if you just really vibed with this episode and you want to feel more of these feelings, I would really recommend checking out the HBO original series, The Leftovers,
Yep.
and also the Max original, not HBO, but Max original series, Station 11, which both go through a very similar kind of vibe. And Station 11 has, at its core, a relationship that is so affecting and so powerful between two characters that it just rips your heart out over and over and over again. So,
So
if you vibed with those,
yeah.
oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with you, but I think that part of why this affected people in this way is that the payoff is very quick, and
Mhm.
the way that they give you the character building moments and the little small things between these two characters are so intense and well done. And I have to give credit to the two actors. I think that it is in part because of the chemistry between them and their incredible talent. And there's specific scenes I could mention here. There's so many, but even from the get-go, when Frank and Bill start interacting with each other, just masterful in terms of how these actors go about their craft. And I think that is part of it. But I also think it's that people can recognize these little moments, and it's also not trying to make it it's not trying to put this relationship through like any kind of idealistic lens. You don't have these rose-colored glasses on looking at it, and even at the very end between these two characters, there is an acknowledgement that and I guess it's kind of like, to me it's just really a love letter to very long-standing relationships where things aren't always good, but you kind of work through those difficulties, and in this sort of world of the apocalypse, those little moments mean a lot. And so every single interaction between these two characters feels real, and I think that that's why it hits so hard. And there's from the first lunch that Bill makes for Frank, and there's this really great keep in mind, this is a luxury. These are things that people do not have at this point. Frank definitely has not seen it, and he even says, "Are you kidding me?" Basically, like, where did you get this stuff? And it's not just this beautiful meal, but also amazing wine, and like these luxuries that are not, like, you cannot attain these at this point, but yet Bill has them in spades, and he kind of wants to show them off a little bit. And then to the piano scene, which I think we can all agree is an incredibly poignant and like vulnerable scene between these characters. And I think that that's why and you get this all in like basically an hour episode. And the full sort of like spectrum of their relationship. And it's really, I don't know, I thought this was just an impressive piece of work. So hats off Mason and Druckmann and Hoare and all of you. So anyway, what did you think, Stuart?
To go from like the getting to know you, the sweet love making, the first fight, like they go from love making to first fight really fast, which I thought was is a nice touch, to like exploring strawberries, raiders attack, suddenly we're old, or it's a dream, but I know it wasn't a dream. Suddenly we're old, and like not only are we old, but Frank has had this like crazy reversal in his health that kind of comes out of nowhere. Certainly when we've like jumped forward, I don't know, 15 years, it doesn't say, but it had to have been like 10 plus, just based on how much they've aged. I hear Murray Bartlett's partner was affected by the aging of the makeup that they put on Murray Bartlett for that part of the episode. So just like to move quickly through those 4 or 5 different time periods and scenes, I thought was part of the success. And then bringing in Joel and Ellie at the end and seeing how he reacts.
Well, and then of course you have Joel and Tess in there as well, where we get another glimpse of Tess as kind of Frank is working on expanding Bill's concept of what's possible in this time and how they can form connections with other people.
And Anna Torv looks so good.
Yep.
It's like, we're gonna have friends. And Bill's just like, what? I didn't have friends.
It's like, you've been talking to who on the radio? It's like very, very funny.
Does one thing that doesn't make a huge amount of sense here was this supposed smuggling operation. Like, Bill doesn't talk to anybody. Maybe Frank had set up other smuggling points of contact, but where are they getting these supposed smuggled goods?
Mm-hmm.
What does the code really add up to if it's like new stuff is in the 60s, if you're playing the 60s, but where are they getting new stuff?
Right.
That's all. I actually think that the electricity didn't add up for me either.
No, and the gas. I was like, none of that.
There is no way you would be able. First of all, generator is loud. So like all of these things that they're showing of them like eating strawberries and stuff would have a generator in their background. You're like, yep. But then also just, getting the gas to power, I mean, not just like, some lights and stuff, but an electric fence that can kill people. I was just like,
that is such an, and it's on all the time, right? And
it's on all the time. I was just like, I think they should have just ditched the electric fence and all that stuff and just had there be, booby traps and other ways, and have them keep cooking with a gas stove or a wood stove or something, chopping some wood. But I thought that it was pushing believability a little too far to have them have these lights on in their house all the time, 25 years after the apocalypse.
I thought the same, and I was actually waiting for them to rig some sort of solar thing together, and I was sort of surprised they didn't do that. But
the video game equivalent of Bill's compound is just like tripwires with explosives. So much more like gunpowder age style, as opposed to this like Shangri-La that he has. But on the plus side, they just walk away from all this at the end of the episode. So
But no, I agree with you. I kept thinking this is an enormous amount, like the resources, which was why I thought it was sort of funny when Frank and Bill have this argument about using a little bit of gasoline for a lawnmower, and it's like, well, how are you keeping all of this going, right? Like if you're talking about waste of resources, this whole setup makes a little less sense. But I think that it is what it is in terms of that. Like I think we're supposed to suspend disbelief at now, and now they're on their way and they don't have access back to that. But I also thought that the scenes with Joel and Joel processing both the scene between him and Bill and their sort of understanding, not like they definitely don't trust each other or like each other, but there's a realism between them. I think that is really interesting, and kind of funny that Bill addresses his last letter to Joel of all people. So I thought that was good, and certainly takes us to sort of a next step between Joel and Ellie, given that Ellie's the one reading the letter. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, what a gut punch for Joel too, though.
Yep.
To read that letter. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, it just comes back to like what the point of the episode is, which is this is a fairly common storytelling technique in film and TV. I remember a book that I read when I was doing my film degree called Invisible Ink: A Key to Telling Stories That Work, which is a really good, just kind of like practical, hands-on way to put stories together. They talk about the use of clones, is what they call them, to basically, illustrate paths not taken by the hero. So the classic one is Frodo and Gollum. I mean, Gollum is a mirror image of Frodo that shows what Frodo could become if he succumbs to the power of the ring. So that's his purpose in the story, is to be that cautionary tale. And it's the same here, where Bill is essentially a proxy for Joel, and what he's the lesson that he's supposed to impart is to kind of open your heart and let love in, because if you don't, there's really nothing left for you here. So that's the point of this whole story, is to kind of show how that happened for him, and to kind of impart that lesson to Joel in as strong a fashion as he can through his letter at the end.
Right, but it's also pretty depressing for Joel because, Joel's reason for being, his daughter is gone. Tess is now gone, though we're still learning a little bit about that because he's very closed down about that. And I know that the obvious thing for the audience and for everybody is that, okay, now it's going to be Ellie. And he kind of says to Ellie, well, this is the plan and we're going to go and do this. So I do think that there is some, because like if you look at Bill's actions, now that his person of protection is gone, he's gone too. And so what is Joel supposed to do with that? And I think that we know that he is now like basically protecting Ellie, but it's he has failed in a lot of ways here in terms of that particular role, right? So that cannot feel very good, and I think it will inform what we see of him down the line, and it informs what this character is and what they do.
It's interesting to me too, the contrast between how Joel is acting toward Ellie in the show versus in the game. And I would say the game is not always consistent, but the way that Joel speaks to Ellie when she tries to talk about Tess, he shuts her down. He does open up about like the origins of the pandemic, which is like kind of showing at least a little bit of interest in her. Then he like recites the rules to her at the end, which I'm told are from the game, but I don't recall where they come in. But in the game, Joel, she tries to apologize for Tess, and he just says to her kind of softly and warmly, Tess, you don't have to worry about me. Which is like not 180 degrees from how Joel is reacting on the show. But later on in the game, Joel is kind of gruff with her again. So it does kind of have like a weird pendulum sort of parabolic swing going on. But I'm finding it interesting that Pedro Pascal, it feels like there's more consistency so far with him being kind of like gruff almost all the time. But showing signs at least of chilling. He like, him asking to see the bite one more time is kind of interesting. Like he's seen it a bunch of times already, but he has to see it again before he kind of like agrees or makes her agree to these promises that what you say goes.
Right. And then, I mean, I also think, they're both very independent in doing their own thing, even though they are going to be embarking on this adventure together. But like the whole her keeping asking for the gun, her saying, "Hey, there's a whole room of them," and everybody is still like, "No, don't do that." And the gun that she eventually finds and hides is Bill's gun, and it's the gun I'm
Frank's gun.
assuming. Oh, sorry, was that Frank's gun?
Yeah, it's one he pulls out of that desk when the Raiders attack.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking it was the one that Bill had when he was threatening him across the table. But okay, so it's Frank's gun. So despite the fact that she's saying that she'll follow the rules, there is a tug of war between these two characters. And she absolutely knows he does not want her to have a weapon like that. And is just doing this. And I don't necessarily blame her, but the way she even hides it, very suspicious. Like I think I would be suspicious of her when he walks into the room and she's like, "Oh, nothing to see here," basically. But I think that it sets up for some things I think we're going to see down the line between these two. You know, they are more similar than they are different in terms of characterization. I also really liked her fascination with the car, similar to the video game, because she's never been in one before, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah,
I'm assuming, is that a car that appears in the game?
that's very close to the model of the truck that's in the game. Yeah, there's a scene of her as they're driving away from Bill's town, Lincoln, I guess is what it's called.
Yep.
She's pulled a porno mag from his stash in his house with dudes on the cover, and she's talking about how the pages are stuck together. That I don't think is going to make it into the show.
Well, also I should mention Lincoln, Mass is like it's a really pretty town. It has like the Cordova Art and Sculpture Museum and things like that. But again, since they're filming in Canada, I doubt they could do that. So they just have these little like signs and sort of quasi New Englandy feel to this town.
Yeah, white picket fences is about as far as they got.
Yeah.
So other things to talk about here are in the game. I've said that there is a Bill, there is a Frank, and Bill, as you've talked about, Kyle is a curmudgeon, and he is only one way. In the game, a spoiler alert if you haven't played the game and you give a damn about the plot, you're running through this town trying to find a car battery, which is kind of funny when you consider the show pilot. You're trying to find this truck battery, and you run into a house at one point, and there's a guy hanging from the ceiling, and Bill is with you, and he's like, "Oh," like he has a reaction, and then you learn that that's Frank. He was the only guy who would wear that shirt, and you find a note from Frank if you look around in the house, and the note from Frank basically says, I'm so sick of you and you're stuck in your ways, and I decided to get out of here, but I guess you were right about one thing. Trying to leave here is going to kill me," because he'd gotten bitten. But like it's actually like feeds into how they've changed the story of Bill. Bill in this show has had an arc, and he has changed his ways. He's like, grown to meet Frank somewhere in the middle, whereas the Bill in the game just stayed the same kind of dick he always was, and it had a much more tragic ending. Even though Bill survives the sequence with Joel and Ellie in the game, they drop him off at his house, and he's like, "Get the hell out of here! I hate you." He's literally just always a dick.
That's it is interesting to me though how many people have described this episode as some combination of like tragic or sad or gut wrenching because in a lot of ways it's actually very triumphant. I mean,
I agree.
these two people found each other in this impossible world and built a life together and lived together for many years and grew old together and then went out on their own terms in a world where nobody gets to do that. I mean, the tragedy of the beginning of Up is that, Carl survives. Like
he has to continue.
Yeah,
And
he has to find a way to soldier on. And here we don't get that. And I think it's really important because for a couple of reasons. First of all, because we don't have very many, even still today, um, you know, happy endings for gay romances. That we just don't like. There's not very many examples of that in pop culture. Um, and then secondly, I think that this is in some ways this is like a lesson that I don't think The Walking Dead ever learned, which is that uh, the story can serve a sharper contrast to the struggles of the main characters than a sad one. So like I stopped watching The Walking Dead at some point, but at every single place that they came, you just were like, okay, well, you know, how is this going to end tragically this time? Like, how is everybody going to die this time? They just always had this note that they went back to of like, everything's going to go wrong. People are going to be revealed to be these horrible animals, and our heroes are going to have to flee. And so, this is a keener contrast to the world that Joel is living in, to see Frank and Bill live this happy life together, comfortable life together, and really build this thing,
Right.
on their own terms.
And
So,
I think even you see these little hints with and you're right, like the trope with gay romances and characters is that they tend to end tragically and early, at least for one part of the couple, and then the other one has to soldier on or whatever it might be. And in this case, there's this one line that Frank says to Bill, because Bill sort of is, this is before so the more dramatic things happen to Frank, where he has this neurodegenerative thing happening, and he says something like, Bill is like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm aging faster than you, and Frank is like, well, we're getting old, that means we're still living and surviving. And so I think that is definitely a tip of the hat to that specific theme about gay characters that often happen. And then the other one is at the very end of their sort of story, or close to the end of their storyline, and Bill, who has been probably, he's had so many challenges. He before he met Frank, he'd never really clearly had never been with a male partner before, and talks about that. And there's just a lot of longing and unrequited feelings there, and that he has to work through all these things, but found Frank, and that helped him grow so much as a character. And at the end, they are making the choice. Despite the fact that a little bit of the choice is taken from them just because of Frank's condition, it's still a choice that they're making, and it is triumphant. And so it's something very unusual to see. And in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, where often the choice is like, oh, we have to take this person out because they got bitten and are infected, and make that split decision, kind of akin to what Tess did in the last episode. So the fact that this is not what they have to live through, and that they have a peaceful ending, is just a very different theme than we've seen in a lot of other shows.
Well, we've talked about Fleetwood Mac and Cream. Did you guys want to talk at all about the Linda Ronstadt song that comes back at the end?
Yeah, something occurred to me while I was watching it, and okay, this is just me being crazy, and I don't think that not crazy, but like I don't think that this was in the intention, and the person who sort of recommended to it is now getting a lot of play, I guess, on social media. But I thought this was supposed to give a bit of a like foreshadowing to what was going to happen to one of the characters. But and I was like, oh wow, that's really kind of dark. But she has been suffering from a Parkinson like condition, and I was like, oh gosh, is this why they picked this song? I think they just really picked it because it has all of those elements, and it wasn't so well known, and just has all the feels in terms of like an unrequited kind of love story. It's also a great song. But like we've seen with many other shows, it's now rocketed this song to like everybody is like downloading this. And I don't think that she gets any of the royalties for it. I think Gary White, who wrote it, is getting it. But she even said she's really happy for his success. But
Ouch.
I know. But it is an incredible song, and I mean, if you aren't a Linda Ronstadt fan, you should be, because she's got some really amazing stuff out there. But this specifically is a really good one.
It is interesting to hear Craig Mazin on the HBO podcast talk about how he was like having a hard time coming up with it, and so he calls or reaches out to his friend who works in Broadway, and it's just like, hey man, here's the situation, like unrequited love, never gonna have a lover, very sad. What's the theme song for Bill? And the guy shoots back with this song like right away within 20 seconds, I think he said. So he just has a catalog of sad songs maybe in his head.
Yeah, and the guy who I'm trying to remember what the name of the person was, but it's Seth Rudetsky who recommended it, and he has this whole he's like a YouTube series and another thing, and he did one I think this week where he breaks down why this is such a great song, and it's kind of fun to watch it. And so I definitely think he was really excited about this. So certainly check it out. He tends to do a lot more Broadway sort of reviews, but this one I think he made an exception for.
Well, gotta get on that zeitgeist. Next time on this show, it looks like we're gonna be running into some people with ill intent as they start their road trip in this pickup truck trying to get to Wyoming. They're still in Massachusetts. It's still a long way to get to Wyoming. In the game, I believe the next stop is Pittsburgh. How far is it from HA? Well, how long is the drive from 10 miles west of Boston to Pittsburgh?
I think it's probably at least 8 hours.
So they've been on the road. One of the things that Bill throws you in the game as you're driving away is a hose so that you can siphon gas out of cars. So I think on some level, this game and this show, they have the same sort of lack of reality about how gas works, because we know that if it's sitting in a car for 20 years, that ain't gas anymore. That is broken down into something else.
Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe Bill had like an extra special supply. Maybe he has a gas refinery.
Yeah, a refinery.
I don't know.
It could.
Boy, HA, you were right on. 8 hours, 25 minutes from Boston to Pittsburgh. I've been living out west too long, because in my mind I was like, that's got to be at least 24 hours
That's
drive.
7 days.
I'll admit,
those two cities are nowhere close to each other.
I will admit that I had a little bit of like I went to see Falling Water at some point, the house, and so I had a sense of what the drive from New York was. So I'll admit I cheated a little bit, at least on that, but I was estimating. I'm pretty happy though.
So but we'll see if we get all the way to Pennsylvania tonight when the episode airs. I don't know if you guys watch it when it comes out. Kyle, you're going to be on a beach somewhere, so.
But while I'm recovering from my sun tanning, I'll find a time to squeeze it in.
Oh, and Kyle, I will say, I don't know if you can get them on the island you are on, but on the Big Island there is the this amazing like macadamia shortbread cookie company. And those cookies are phenomenal. I think it's like Big Island Candies or something is the name of the company. So you should try to check them out. I would imagine you can get them where you are too. So
I will keep my eyes peeled.
That
sounds awesome.
They're like chocolate dipped shortbread cookies. Just amazing.
Well, we'll leave Kyle with that quest, and we will try to rejoin next week or next time we can get together to talk about The Last of Us. So I hope that everybody listening along enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of the episode of the show so far. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, and you can check out all of our episodes online at reanimated.podbean.com. And you can also give us a tweet at reanimatedpcast. Any final parting thoughts from H.A. Conrad or Kyle Diaz?
No, I just think this was definitely one of my favorite episodes that I've watched in a long time of anything. So really, really can't recommend it enough. So I would love to hear what people think about it.
Just Nick Offerman, that's all.
Yeah, I know.
Just astonishing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah.
He's on tour. I think he's on tour right now too. So you might be able to catch his. I think he does music and comedy. He's got like 5 or 6 locations. So yeah, cool. Let's talk again soon. And for me, I'm gonna say peace out.
And ciao.
See you.
Aloha.
Oh, that's just what I just said.